Hello, everybody. Between now and the end of, well, the next couple of weeks before the exam two, you have a whole lot of information to cover. And I'm going to provide you with a very brief overview of some of the major themes and ideas that you'll be covering over the next couple of weeks before exam two. And I've just called this the Age of Revolutions. And so what we see is these revolutions beginning in Europe, especially Western Europe, and from there expanding around the world. And these are the scientific revolution, the market revolution, and the Atlantic revolution. Now, the scientific revolution begins really in the early modern era in the 17th century, and it's a revolution that's continued ever since. It's a revolution that's changed how people look at the world and examine the world. The market revolution really began to gel in the 18th century, and it's continued to the present. And it's a revolution that changed how people lived their lives, how people worked, where people lived. And then finally, you have the Atlantic revolutions, which is the revolutions. These are political revolutions that swept across both sides of the Atlantic, both Europe and the New World that had been colonized by European powers in previous eras. So we're going to be looking at these three different revolutions. So we're going to begin with the scientific revolution. Now, the scientific revolution has its origins in the developments that we've examined already in this class, the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Age of Discovery. Now, the Renaissance, which that was this rebirth of the study of Greek philosophy and Greek science, and because of the work of Renaissance scholars, these ancient Greek works and Roman Latin works were being published and printed using the printing press. And these works were being made more available, and the Greeks, the Greek philosophers and scientists had really examined and subjected the universe to their reason, to trying to understand the world and how it works, and they had all kinds of different theories and ideas, and now these works were available for study by European scholars in the early modern era. Another factor in the scientific revolution, another cause of the scientific revolution, was the Reformation. The Reformation saw both Protestants and Catholics really emphasize education and establish new schools, and that became very important for the spread of new information and new ideas. And also, especially the Protestant Reformation, there was a real emphasis on literacy, because the idea was that all Christians should read the Bible for themselves, and so there's a real emphasis on public education and even allowing the poorest people to learn how to read. And this spread of literacy was very important because it allowed more and more people to read, and they weren't just reading the Bible, they were reading all these other works that are being produced, and that generated a lot of interest and curiosity, and really expanded the number of people who were educated and learned. Then you have the Age of Discovery. The Age of Discovery really created a lot of curiosity around the world, and a lot of curiosity about how the world operated. And remember, because of the Age of Discovery, people and explorers were discovering new lands and new animals and plants and peoples and cultures and climates, and this generated a lot of curiosity. And curiosity is what really begins what we call the scientific method. The scientific method was one of the great developments of this period. The scientific method is a process, it's a technology, it's a way to learn information about the natural world, and understand natural phenomenon. And the scientific method really begins with curiosity, like trying to understand, trying to explain or learn about why nature works the way it does. And so it was very exciting for people to really address these issues, like why does the sun do this? Why does the moon do that? Why do the stars do this? Why do the plants do this? That curiosity was really stimulated. And then another aspect of the scientific method is inductive reasoning, the idea of empiricism, the idea where when you approach a problem or approach an issue, you don't approach it with a made-up mind. You approach it with an open mind, and you base your conclusions on data and the observations that you make. another key aspect of the scientific method is the hypothesis. Once you've examined the data, you come up with a preliminary explanation or hypothesis to explain some kind of natural phenomenon. And then in a pure science, what you do is you set up a system to test your hypothesis, and that's the final part of this entire scientific process. Now, during the scientific revolution, there were many advances in many different subjects, but the advances in physics and astronomy really caught the attention of the world because understanding the mysteries of the cosmos and the mysteries of the stars and the planets was something that really generated a great deal of excitement. And so you have first the work of Galileo using his telescope in support of the heliocentric theory, and then you finally have the work of one of the greatest scientists of the age, Isaac Newton, and his theory of gravity, and using the new invention of calculus, using mathematics to explain something as mysterious as the elliptical orbits of the planets around the sun. And this scientific revolution brought about a new way of looking at the world, the idea of what is called the Enlightenment. It was a philosophical movement that swept across Europe in the 18th century, and it's this belief that human beings using reason can improve their material lives and improve the condition of the human race over time. It's this idea of progress, and the Enlightenment thinkers all believe that they're very confident that human beings using their powers of reason and using science as a tool could really help create a better progressive society. And one of the more foremost of these thinkers is Voltaire. You also have John Locke and Adam Smith over in the British Isles. And the Enlightenment thinkers, one of the things they did was they applied the principles of science, this idea of observation, and trying to uncover laws that govern the natural phenomenon. They applied that to understanding human society. So John Locke, for example, examined how societies develop and developed the contract theory of government that was so influential on our founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, the idea that governments are formed when people come together and form a contract, and that's the beginnings of government. And the purpose of the contract is to protect people's, what he calls their natural rights, their right to life, liberty, and property. And then you have somebody like Adam Smith, who looked at the world of economics for the first time and came up with rules that govern the economic behavior of human beings, the laws of supply and demand. And these ideas continue to be important and influential to this day. Now, another revolution is the market revolution, and the market revolution also has its causes in the events that we've studied. The Age of Discovery led to development of global trade and the transatlantic trade. This generated great amounts of wealth, and that wealth became the basis for the development of new technologies and factories, as we'll see. Another factor and another cause of the market revolution was population growth that became, especially in Europe. A lot of it had to do with a warming climate in the 18th century, but also had to do with the fact that potatoes and corn introduced to Europe from the New World. These new crops allowed for better nutrition and allowed for more people to live and not get sick and not suffer from malnutrition, and that did a lot to really promote population growth. And finally, another factor in the market revolution was the scientific revolution. All these revolutions are connected. Because the scientific method was often used by people to find better and more productive and more efficient ways to produce goods. And that's what the market revolution was all about. But it is the idea of how can we produce and transport goods at a larger level to meet the needs, to meet the demands of a growing population. So markets were expanding, people's demands for goods were expanding, and people wanted to use the latest technology and scientific thinking to try to find the best, most efficient way, the most profitable way to meet those demands and to manufacture and produce goods. And the market revolution was really a number of different revolutions all rolled into one. It was an agricultural revolution, in the sense that new ways were developed to mass produce farm goods, and there was a transportation revolution with the development of the steamship and the railroad. And then there was a revolution in the manufacturing process, and we see the development of a factory system where you have a factory where people invest in machines. Remember, all that money from trade, like the transatlantic trade, that money was invested in new technology and building, finding tools and finding new machinery that could be used to mass produce goods. And a factory was a place where you would locate your machines, and then the workers would come to the factory to work on the machines. And that was the factory system. Now, one of the results of this market revolution was that it saw the rise of a middle class. The middle class was already strong, but it continued to grow and prosper and expand because of all the profits generated by this massive market revolution. And another development we see is the growth of cities, because factories were located in these new emerging factory cities, and so what we see is a transfer of the population away from villages and from the countryside, moving to these large cities to work in these factories. And so the factory system led to the growth of cities, in addition to the rise of the wealth of the middle class. Now finally, we have the political revolutions that occurred. And these political revolutions, what historians have noticed is that these political revolutions changed how governments operated. Now, before these Atlantic revolutions, you have the old regime, the old way of political system. And then what replaced it was an entirely new type of political system. So the old regime, you had monarchy. In the new regime, you have republics. And so instead of having a hereditary monarch, you have instead elected officials, people elected by the people. Now, in a monarchy, everybody is subject to the king's authority. But in a republic, in a liberal form of government, all people are citizens who participate as citizens in the political life of the republic. In the old regime, you have privileges where some people, based on their hereditary privileges, they can. In the old regime, the aristocrats tended to dominate the governments. Well, in liberalism, the idea is that in the eyes of the law, everybody's equal. Everybody has the same rights. Instead of having privileges for the few, you have rights for everybody. All citizens have rights, equal rights, in a liberal system of government. And finally, not finally, but another thing is, in the old regime, it's tradition. Custom and tradition and authority. Those are the hallmarks of the old regime. In a liberal system of government, the system of government is not based on custom and tradition and authority. It's based on a written constitution that is written and drafted by the elected representatives of the people, and the written constitution lays out how the government is supposed to work under the law. And then in the old regime, you have an established church. In the new regime, you have all citizens having freedom of conscience, being able to choose the religion of their choice. All right, now what are these Atlantic revolutions? Well, you have the American Revolution that kind of got the ball rolling. That was over when the American colonies won their independence from Great Britain. Then you have the French Revolution, which is really a series of revolutions all kind of rolled into one. It started out as an effort to create a constitutional monarchy. Then it became a radical republic under Robespierre. And then there was a reaction against that radical republic by the more affluent middle class, and so you have the reactionary republic. And eventually it all collapsed into a military dictatorship, which we associate with Napoleon. Now, there are other revolutions. The American Revolution and the French Revolution inspired the Haitian Revolution. On the island of Haiti, the slaves there revolted against French, and eventually by 1804 had secured their independence, even when Napoleon sent an army to try to crush them. And Haiti became the second republic after the United States to win its independence. And then from 1808 to 1823, you had revolutions across the Spanish Empire in what is today Latin America, and all these, most of these areas became independent and established republics of their own, like Brazil and Argentina and Chile and Peru. and those revolutions came about as well. Now, in the period after Napoleon was defeated, eventually you have this period of revolution and counter-revolution. So at first, after Napoleon was defeated and revolutionary France had been crushed by an alliance of conservative powers, they met in Vienna, Austria. It's called the Congress of Vienna, and they were determined to beat back liberalism, to kind of turn the clock back, to kind of pretend that the French Revolution and Napoleon had not happened. But that was not to be, because you had a surging middle class. You know, the middle class had grown and because of the market revolution, and they were not to be denied. If you were middle class, you were thinking, why do these aristocrats think they can control everything and be in charge? You know, I worked hard, I have my own business, I've made money, I should have a voice in the government and not have to play second fiddle to a bunch of hereditary aristocrats. So the growth of the middle class led to a surge of revolution. So you have kind of like waves of revolution, one in 1820, another in 1830, and then the biggest one in 1848. The revolution of 1848 was a mass revolution you had in the cities in 1848, you had many cities where you had working people working in factories who were fed up with their low pay and hard working hours, and they kind of rose up too. And it was this revolution of 1848 that inspired a young German intellectual by the name of Karl Marx, who had this vision of eventually the lower classes, the proletariat, the urban working class, as he called it, would rise up and create a whole new system, which he called communism. Well, that was just a theory in the day, but the revolution of 1848, the mass revolutions of 1848, really scared the middle class. By 1848, they were wealthy enough that they were afraid that if these working class people rose up, they might try to take away what they had, you know, and tax them or hurt them, and they saw these revolutions as being troublesome and problematic. So what we see after 1848 is the middle class still supported nationalism, they still supported liberalism, but they wanted liberalism to be done in an orderly fashion. So what we see is a development of kind of counter-revolutionary reactionary governments, such as after the revolutions in France in 1848, you have the government of Napoleon III of France, a nephew of the Napoleon who established a regime in France. And in Italy and Germany, under the leadership of Cavour and Bismarck, Italy and Germany were united to form a single country, but it was done not through radical revolution, but through, as Bismarck liked to say, blood and iron, through war and diplomacy. And Bismarck and Cavour were actually very elite aristocrats who realized that they needed the support of the rising middle class to protect their own interests and to advance their countries. And so what we see happening is that kind of an alliance between the old aristocratic elites and these affluent middle class people coming together and forming kind of moderate liberal systems of government. I mean, they're not quite as liberal as some would want, but they're liberal enough. They have liberal vestiges, liberal aspects to them. And believe it or not, you can kind of think of the American Revolution, the American Civil War, as kind of a counter-revolution or a middle-class revolution, because in a lot of ways, the many leaders of the emerging factory owners and businessmen of the North, they saw slavery as a disgrace and as something that needed to be eliminated, as something that was unliberal. And so, but there was no mass revolution. Instead, slavery ended through actions of the government. It was orderly. It was done through the military. And in the same way that Bismarck united Germany through blood and iron, through war and troops, Abraham Lincoln, in a way, united the United States through military force by imposing the North's will on the South and ending slavery. So in a lot of ways, you can kind of see how the American Revolution, American Civil War, and these other developments we looked at, like what was happening in Germany and Italy, are kind of related, and to a large degree they reflect basically the newfound influence and wealth and confidence of a rising middle class of businessmen, factory owners, and the like. All right, so that really is a real fast overview of what you're going to be looking at and reading about over the next couple of weeks.